Welcome to the Brief News Brief. I'm your host, Isaac Lopez. This is the Life Given Radio. We've got a lot to get to today. Variety is a noun, meaning the quality or state of being different or diverse, the absence of uniformity, sameness, or monotony. On this show, we try to not become monotonous. We try to strive for variety. I have a slew of stories for you today, ranging from local news to national voting scandals to NFL insisting on racism and everything else in between. So if some of these stories don't suit your taste, all the better. Just stick around, be patient. Maybe you'll hear something here that you wouldn't hear elsewhere because you have your same podcasts that bring you the same stuff every single week or every single day. And hopefully this will expose you to some stories that maybe you didn't know were happening. So we're going to jump to the local level. The majority of you live in Moscow, so I do want to keep up to speed with those of you who are local. And Moscow's city council goes liberal once again. Not that this really surprises anyone, but they approved of gender-neutral bathrooms in a recent decision, which they said the transition to those bathrooms, no pun intended, should not be too difficult. The Daily News, Moscow Pullman Daily News reported that one of them said that 49% of Moscow's restroom facilities would simply need a lock or sign change to make them gender neutral, and 16% are portable restrooms at parks. So they're breaking down all of the bathrooms across Moscow's city limits and talking about how they can be converted to gender neutral. And they even get to the council chambers there at the City Hall. They go on to say that Moscow's Human Rights Commission Chairman Ken Founts said it is not just transgender people that feel uncomfortable using gender-specific bathrooms, but also parents and caretakers who need to help the opposite gender use the restroom. Obviously, I understand that we probably could use some bathrooms that are family bathrooms. I don't have an issue with that per se, but they are just going out of their way to make this a transgender issue. This is just the same slippery slope we insist shoving ourselves down, and Moscow's city council wants to continue to prove that they are liberal time and again. So this should not be surprising to anyone. Just another call for Christians to engage in local politics. The University of Idaho president recently told students to stay home. If this isn't proof of liberalism being embraced everywhere, at every level, U of I technically being in one of the most red states, then I don't know what is. This, once again, coming from the Daily News. U of I President Scott Green wrote in his regular Monday memo that the UI campus in Moscow is seeing a decrease in new COVID-19 cases. Last week, the university tested 789 students and returned a 0.89% positivity rate. He added, there are no students in isolation, no Greek chapters in quarantine. Naturally, he encouraged students to remain at their permanent residence after Thanksgiving break and finish the semester remotely. He wrote that testing will be available before students leave and upon their return if they do decide to come back to campus. So at this point, we're just self-inflicting lockdowns. We're not even thinking critically. 2020 will make pessimists and idiots of us all. So let's jump from local to international news. This report is coming from Sam Nice, a contributor over at TLG News, with another great report. Unfortunately, so it's a great report, but the news sucks, as nothing has really changed there. The stupidity continues on as the lockdowns make a comeback that would make Derrick Rose jealous. Here is a list of countries and actions that will bring some nightmares for you guys. In France, residents may leave their homes only for those reasons listed on, get this, on the government issued attestation forms. You actually have to have papers to leave your to leave your home with forms. Outdoor exercise is limited to 1 hour and within 1 kilometer of your home. Now, if you know anything about France, they love to cycle. Now, thankfully, we're coming into the winter months, and that's not as much of an issue. But if they continue to do this, they will probably have more riots on their hands. In Belgium, only 1 close contact is allowed in your home. 2, if you live alone. Gatherings outside the home can be no more than 4 people. I can just imagine the state of the church in Belgium, what they have to do to continue to meet, because honestly, the pandemic is more of a scamdemic at this point. In Italy, gatherings for funerals, weddings, and baptisms are banned. You're taking away the joy of the people at this point. In Spain, residents must stay home from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., except in the Canary Islands, which I guess the Canary Islands are just the special place. And then in Germany, shops may remain open with no more than 1 customer per 10 square meters of space. So they're just like, 6 feet just isn't enough. We need 10 square meters of space. Maybe someone can do the math. I teach rhetoric, not a math teacher, but that seems a bit excessive. I will include all of the links and sources to this show in the show notes. Over the weekend, well, over this entire week, people took to the streets to celebrate Joe Biden as the projected president-elect. Now, I parlayed about this, and I just find it funny, the verbiage, the words that they use to describe this situation, the projected president-elect. And I think that captures what the media has done, as they are almost projecting and willing the former Vice President Joe Biden to become our president. If you will remember, Joe Biden has gone on to accept victory, announce victory in this presidential race, which we will get to later. There is plenty to talk about and unpack in the last week and a half since our election updates. But if you recall, during, I believe it was the first debate, Chris Wallace asked Biden, this is coming from a report actually, because I didn't remember this, but Chris Wallace asked Biden, will you urge your supporters to stay calm while the vote is counted? And will you pledge not to declare victory until the election is independently certified? Biden answered without doubt, yes. The former vice president then acknowledged this, continuing on with the report, that counting this year's election results would take longer than typical election years. Here's the deal, Biden stated, we count the ballots. As you pointed out, some of these ballots in some states can't even be opened until election day. And if there's thousands of ballots, it's going to take time to do it. So Biden, I mean, we joke about his memory kind of being shot. We joke about how he's really not been at, he's not in the prime of his mental game. But he did say that he was going to wait to be announced the president by the actual sources that have that power to do so, not the media. Newsflash, the media cannot decide when and where our president officially becomes our president. I think the media has just assumed that authority and that power, and a lot of people have gone along with it and gotten out into the streets and started celebrating discounting COVID-19. Oh, thanks, Ruth. My wife just brought me coffee. It is 6:45 in the morning. I am too excited for it to be this early, but I've been getting more and more excited as we've approached this show, and Ruth just knows how to take care of me. I appreciate it. So we've seen people, thousands of people, Portland, Seattle, Washington, D.C., even all of the liberal cities that have been on lockdowns except for the riots, that have been on lockdowns except for the protests, that have been on lockdowns except for celebrating Joe Biden's projected presidency. But it's okay. It's all okay. Ruth, it's fine. Don't worry about it. She's not even looking at me. It's okay. We really have seen to memory hole the consequences of the last 8.5 months. And I'm not talking about the consequences of contracting the coronavirus, but rather lockdowns. Do we remember the anxiety/suicidal tendencies that shot up through the roof because of the coronavirus? Lockdowns is so one-dimensional, it ain't even funny. This article from the New York Times recently came out, and it's a nice reminder of the side effects of lockdowns, of just locking down, putting a chokehold on the economy. And it begins. Remote learning, lockdowns, and pandemic uncertainty have increased anxiety and depression among adolescents and heightened concerns about their mental health. Aya, a 14-year-old, sums up the frustration we all feel. It felt like I was trapped in my own little house and everyone was far away. When you were with friends, you're completely distracted and you don't think about the bad stuff going on. During the beginning of the quarantine, I was so alone. All the sad things I used to brush off, I realized I couldn't brush them off anymore. End quote. Here are some stats that the New York Times put and included in their article. A recent study of 3,300 high school students found that nearly 1/3 reported feeling unhappy or depressed in recent months. Since the start of the pandemic, the National Alliance on Mental Illness has heard from many young adults experiencing anxiety and depression, which the organization attributes partly to social isolation. The group has cautioned parents and teachers to look for warning signs, including severe risk-taking behavior, and on and on. The proportion of children's emergency room visits related to mental health has increased significantly during the pandemic, highlighting concerns about the psychological effects that lockdowns and social distancing and social depravity, that wasn't included, have had on youth. You can read more about this at the New York Times. We've also seen in some places that lockdown deaths, not COVID deaths, lockdown deaths, whether it's suicide, whether it's people just doing horrific things to other people in homes, have equaled or have surpassed COVID deaths. But that's not being reported on because it doesn't fit the overall narrative. But after hearing all of this, don't worry. Dr. Fauci says that all will be fine. In a recent interview, I think we get a cut and dried picture of the real desire that the left had to politicize this pandemic, to win an election. And yes, I use cut and dried very specifically here on this channel. If you don't know why, just scroll down a little bit. On Thursday, Fauci proclaimed, certainly it's not going to be a pandemic for a lot longer because I believe the vaccines are going to turn that around. Now, this report is coming from Blaze, and it's a change of tune for the good doctor. Just a few weeks ago, he was talking about how we would need to be wearing masks into the end of 2021 and 2022. Why the change, though? Maybe it lines up with Pfizer and biotech announcing that they are developing a coronavirus vaccine that boasts an efficacy rate above 90%. But we've seen this where first trials of vaccines are not going to just be the cure. I mean, we take flu shots, and yet flu is still around. Actually, it's had peak years since we've had vaccines. My bet, and this is getting away from the news and much more into opinion, is that Fauci saw the news that Vice President Joe Biden was going to be elected, and the Orange Man is now going to be out of office, so it's okay to start sounding hopeful. And you've seen that brand of messaging being pushed by the Democratic Party. We can get back to normal. Anyway, let's move on to the actual election. That's probably why you guys are here. If you aren't really a news junkie and this is your outlet, which I know for some of you it is, and I'm very grateful that that is the case. Let's actually get to it. Georgia has ordered a recount or retabulation of all of the votes in its states. Now, I believe there are 16 electoral votes to be had in Georgia, and so this would be big. Biden has held a 14,000 vote lead, but we now get to see that the 5 million ballots cast in Georgia's presidential race must be recounted in every county by Friday morning and finished by Wednesday at midnight, state election officials said Thursday. So we're starting to see actual legitimate action to verify the efficacy and the authority of this election to make sure that there was no fraud, because there were plenty of irregularities popping up. So this is one example of President Trump double checking. That is what is happening here. There are plenty of voting irregularities that have raised enough questions to ask for a recount in many of these states. For better or for worse, there has been much doubt cast on the integrity of the ballots being cast. On the bright side, after all the due process has been carried out, and I'm going to pause here and say that this is within Trump's rights to ask for recounts. This is not new. And I think it's actually a good thing. But after all of this has been carried out, we will have much more confidence and confirmation when it comes to the validity of this election, because enough accounts have been raised to make this slightly fishy in my book. That is good coffee. Man, I spoke for like 10 minutes without even taking a sip of coffee. If that isn't self-control, I don't know what is. So enter everylegalvote.com/primer. This site explores election data and shares your personal experience of witnessing apparent election fraud to report to law enforcement for investigation and to engage state legislators for corrective action. Every legal vote is a way of tabulating all of the stories of fraud. Some instances of election fraud, just to kind of catch you up on all of the possibilities, shapes, forms that this can take, is stopping the count. We saw multiple places stopping at 3:30 in the morning, Wednesday morning after a quote unquote election day, and somehow people brought in ballots that were all in favor of the Vice President, Joe Biden. There are also mail-in ballots, which have already been proven to show that there is just a higher rate of errors and mistakes that come in with mail-in ballots. Not allowing witnesses to observe the tabulation of votes. There are supposed to be people on site that are there just to observe. There were places, I believe in Wisconsin, where they told those observers to stand 20 feet away, which if you stand 20 feet away from people, you probably won't be able to see the very tiny prints on a ballot. There is also just straight up changing the votes. And then one of the other possibilities is dead people voting. Yes, in 2020, we have seen zombies voting, hypothetically. It's just nuts. So every legal vote also has a map that estimates the amount of fraud that has taken place in each state. With this in mind, that would put a number of states as toss-ups, and they show it in orange on their site. I will include that link to that map because I think it could be very critical to this. But if you take the fraudulent votes out or corrected them from Biden to Trump as they should be, not just frauding the other way, this would be a dominant Trump win. An example of this could be, I emphasize could, because it will need to be confirmed in court, just like everything else will need to be confirmed in court. But a recent article, everylegalvote.com shared on their site. It's not written by them, but I'll link to it. shared a rather damning story on Dominion voting, which is a software system that many polling places use, and it shows that massive amounts were switched from Trump to Biden. And the report says that they're going through the data now, but everything we've combed through so far seems to check out. For example, in Georgia, there appears to have been 17,407 votes switched. Biden is currently leading in Georgia by just 14,000. In Pennsylvania, apparently it's even worse, with over 1 million votes either switched or quote unquote lost. How do you lose something on a computer? It's not, you can't say my dog ate it. You have a trash folder you can go to. This is just beyond, I really can't wrap my head around the level of fraud that this could be. So people might have already debunked this. That is very possible. I do not have the resources or the time to go in and say for sure that this happens. But there are reports, there's so many reports coming out of things happening like this that could easily switch key states to Biden's favor. Anyway, I'm gonna end election talk there, and just end with prayers that justice will be served. So Wednesday was Veterans Day, and my father served in the military for 12, 14 years, and I have nothing but respect and admiration for all who serve, and I thank you all for your service. Recently, a story came to light that kind of got lost in the shuffle of the election cycle, but there was a recent Black Hawk helicopter crash just off the south coast of Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, killing 5 American troops. This happened early Thursday morning. One American is said to have survived the crash. It is said that a mechanical failure is suspected. There is no, and this is coming straight from a UN peacekeeping mission, saying at this point there is no information to indicate the crash, except that it was an accident. This is the deadliest crash for the U.S. military this year. More Americans were killed in the helicopter crash Thursday than have been killed in combat in Afghanistan this year, which is currently 4. And my thoughts and prayers go out to the loved ones, those who lost loved ones in this crash, and share the story, spread it, because I think more people need to be aware of things that are going outside of the election, especially of this weight and this gravity. So I would like to wrap up with the NFL. I threw out that claim the NFL is supporting racism. And once again, it's not the classic racist example that you would think would happen. But before we get to that, they're getting a little power hungry. So Las Vegas Raiders, they play the Kansas City Chiefs, which, as you probably know by now, is my team, the team that I would pull for and root for. They play them in the AFC West twice a year, so I'm so used to saying Oakland, but they've now moved to Las Vegas. So the LA Raiders, not the LA, that's the Chargers. Okay, I'll try this once again. The Las Vegas Raiders lost a draft pick over COVID-19 infraction. So the NFL has fined the Raiders in the past for mask violations. But now, with another violation in play, they have fined the organization $500,000, the head coach John Gruden $150,000, as well as stripping the franchise of a 6th-round draft pick for COVID-19. Now, if you don't understand the NFL, if you don't follow it, that's fine. But the NFL exists. The NFL is thriving off of the ability of young players coming into the league via the draft. And so the teams qualify based on their record, based on a number of things, years past trades that they have made, they will come to the draft and they will have a specific amount of picks in different rounds. The sixth round is much lower than, it's going to be lower in talent, lower in just the level of competition that these players played at. So the sixth round isn't that big of a deal, but yet it's still hampering the job that the Raiders were hoping to get done. We're hoping to do. And really, this is just, I think it's ridiculous because the NFL is very strict with their COVID-19 policies. And I get they're a private organization, but I think they're getting a little power hungry. So here's the last story. The NFL incentivizes the hiring of minority coaches. This is just like affirmative action with universities in our nation. But CBS Sports NFL insider John Canfora has reported that owners are planning to vote on Tuesday on a proposal. This is just reading straight from the report. Sometimes I just have to give it to you guys as is. A proposal that would reward any team that loses a minority coach or executive to another team, but only if that person is hired as the other team's head coach or general manager. So they're trying to incentivize you to groom these coaches specifically if they're minorities, specifically for head coaching or executive jobs. But that under the proposal, which was created by NFL's Workplace Diversity Committee, who else? Any team losing a minority to another team to fill one of those two positions would be rewarded with 2 compensatory draft picks. So what the Raiders lost because of COVID-19, they could now gain back if they hired out, if a coach is hired away from them who happens to be Black or Latino, and they get multiple draft picks. The 2 picks would come in consecutive years and would be third-round picks, which is much higher than the 6th round, obviously. So I want to wrap up the show here because I've gone dramatically over time, but there's so much to get to. I can't keep it condensed down. And maybe the listens might drop for this episode, or maybe they won't come as fast, but that's okay. The Newsbrief has gone down to once a week because the Cut and the Dry has gone up to once a week, basically. But this is just an example of power going to somebody's head. All of these stories, really, except for the helicopter crash. The University of Idaho president saying, hey, just stay home. Europe going back into lockdowns. Vice President Joe Biden projecting himself to be the victor. Fauci going on a power trip saying, hey, you know what? It doesn't matter. We've got vaccines on the way, when he was staunchly saying, no, it's going to be a couple of years before these really kick in. Then you have the NFL fining the Raiders for COVID-19. Then you have the NFL reverse racism. I don't care what you want to call it. This is just nuts. This is what happens. All of these are examples of power going to somebody's head. And that should also be our worry about this election. The media has assumed this authority. The media has assumed this authority over the people that it does not have. In no world should it have this kind of authority to declare a victor. And they really are just willing it into existence. And that's something that I want, hopefully, that our listeners will pick up from listening to our stuff, that although we have our views, and we would like to see President Trump back in office, we just want now the process to be fair, that we can trust the institution of voting. Let me know what you think. You can reach out to me at thelifegivenandreceived@gmail.com. You can find the show on Facebook Watch, on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can see it on Google Podcast, Overcast. We're trying to get on a plethora of sites for you guys. Let us know what your favorite is. Reach out. Also follow me on Parler. I'm really digging that new site. It has been a blast over there, at Isaac Lopez. Pretty simple. You can also find the Instagram account for the podcast at the Life Given Radio. And that's an account really for advertising for all the shows and giving you guys some content, some extra content. So do go over there and give that a listen. This is Isaac Lopez. I'm signing off. I hope that you enjoyed today's show. You can also reach out to me at thelifegivenreceived@gmail.com. As always, remember that the life that you have been given and the life that you have received includes every area of life. This election season is no exception. God bless and have a wonderful weekend.